all your raucous behavior for later on, I guess. Okay. So my name is Roy Burt, and I'm part of the Republican Party of Platte County. I want to thank you all for showing up, and hopefully you all will vote. All those of you that are eligible to will show up to vote for our primary. Let's start things off with the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of one nation, under God, indivisible, justice for all. Thank you. A moment for prayer. Father, thank you for this day and the many blessings that you've given to us. I pray for wisdom, for the candidates, and the truth be exposed, Father, that we hear the truth and it be known to all, Father. And I just pray these things in your name with thanksgiving. Amen. Well, I want to thank you. We're very pleased with the attendance tonight. I'd also like to thank the Platte County Republican Party for sponsoring this event. Our officers are Jerry Kundle, he's right here. Linda Lenz, is she here tonight? Judy Miller, Judy's here. Where, Judy? Judy's the one with the calluses on her fingertips from sending us all the emails. She's our secretary. And then Allison Weaver is our treasurer. Allison, are you here? Oh, okay. Our committee woman is Ann Brickman, and our committee man, I saw him over there, is Doug Brickman. Thanks to these officers and all the precinct people and members at large that make this a grassroots operation quite the success. It really is a grassroots operation. I'm proud to say that we don't have a hierarchy in our party at our meetings. So a big thank you goes out to Platte County School District number 1 and Josh Sandlin. Josh, are you here tonight? I don't see him.
I think he's in his office.
Huh?
He's in his office.
He's in his office. His school hasn't started. Anyway, we were running into yellow lights trying to get this forum for this week in Platte County. We were trying to find a venue, and we were running into maybe kind of sort of stuff. And so when we had a member call up, Josh Sandlin, he said yes. And then within 10, 12 hours overnight, we were a firm commitment to have this beautiful venue. So please, let's take care of it and keep it clean for all of us. And a special thank you up there in the booth to Richard McDonald, who is our sound and engineer and videographer. I have a couple of announcements to make, and I'll make those during our intermission in an hour. In an hour. You got to stay in your seats for an hour till these guys are on the floor. But immediately following the forum, and ideally I want us to end at approximately 8:15 after we've gone through the Senate candidates and the county commissioners, and then lastly will be the House candidates. After we've gone through all three groups, we'll have a meet and greet out there in the lobby, okay? So you find your candidate and ask him questions, or get his phone number, get her phone number for the right reasons, and just ask them questions. Please keep them brief, okay? And realize that everyone can't have a turn right tonight, that get a phone number and call them up, okay? Also in the lobby, you can find flyers and a sign-up sheet on the Republican Party table. If you want to be active and learn more about the Republican side of the government, we want you to know. Also out there are some sample ballots, okay? The green things, don't take them with you. Just look at them and get an idea what your ballot is going to look like for the primary. And before we start the forum, I'd ask you to kill this thing. Put it on silent, please. Your stockbroker can wait an hour before you talk to him tonight. And also, let's hold our applause or something like that. It's not a melodrama, but let's hold our applause till we're done with these 6 up here, and then we'll give them a great hand. Thank you, candidates, for running. This is a tough thing to do. It ain't easy, people, and so here we go. I'd like to introduce now Pat Mitchell. One last thing. We had a drawing to see who would go first with the first question. So Kim Withers won the honor. I don't know, good, bad, whatever. And then she's going to answer the first question first, and then we'll go over to Gary and then Eric and follow down the line. You notice that the candidates are in alphabetical order, okay? So the second question, the first one to answer it will be Gary, and then the second will be Eric, okay? So I'd like to introduce Pat Mitchell, who's done how many? 500 of these? Or?
Days in school, yes.
Yeah. Anyway. Go ahead, Pat.
This forum was organized for the purpose of disseminating information from the candidates. District 6 Senate, District 4 Representative, and the County Commissioner's position are all very important to our county. That is vital. It will be vital that the candidates have a venue such as this, not to debate, but to express their stands on the same questions in the same evening. Within the first question, this candidate will state his or her name and then answer the question. After that, it will be based on a rotating manner. I don't need to tell you that. Roy already did. Catherine Stevens, sitting down here in front, will be the one reading the questions and will address each person by name when they're ready. And each will be given a 90-second time frame to answer the question. I know that seems like a short time, but we have a lot of people. For you, the audience, this is an exercise in listening. We ask that you do not interrupt the process with applause, words, groans, or any other physical response, throwing things, no. This is not the English Parliament. There will be no questions from the audience. After the forum, you may speak one-on-one, as Roy said, out in the hall. After the Senate section is over, there will be a short break where we reset for the other 2. We will repeat the plan for the commissioner candidates. There will be a time for write-in candidates to speak if they so choose. Are there any questions from you guys? Well, you listened well. This is probably in the way.
Is that me? Thank you, Pat. Okay, we're going to start with the Senate District number 6 candidates' questions. And as was already stated, we're going to start with Ms. Withers. When you answer the first question, please state your name and why you're running for this position. And then you can dive into the question. So, question number 1. The Wyoming Republican Party platform spells out the timeless truths that guide and direct Republicans. Explain your reason for running as a Republican rather than as a Democrat or independent. Specifically tell us about 1 or 2 truths from the platform that resonate with you.
Oh, thank you. I am Kim Withers. I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, and I'm a business executive. I took a struggling credit union back in the 90s, and I brought it to where it is today at $700 million in assets. And we have 12 branches, 9 in Wyoming, still headquartered in Wyoming, and the other 3 branches are in Nebraska and Colorado. My family is a 4-H family and a FFA family, and so we just love Southeast Wyoming. I am running because I really care about this district. We hear about that. I think in the last 6 years, we've been slightly neglected for our local issues and our infrastructure, and I want to change that. What I've learned in the past few weeks about the border situation and how it does affect Wyoming, I want to do something with that, and that means doing something local. That means working with our law enforcement, our fire, our municipalities. There is great need up and down the corridor here in southeast Wyoming, and I want to be the one that brings back the focus into this great part of the state. Now, the Wyoming Republican platform, the truce, I'm trying to go through them. They're all through my mind. I do believe in election integrity, and I thank Tafla for what he's done with their Laramie County platform. It is so vital that we make sure that the integrity of our elections are safe and secure. And we know, oh, we got 30 seconds, okay. I also believe I'm trying to think of the other truths. Sorry, I'm on the spot on this. Can you help me, guys? Sorry, you can't. Let's see. And stop. Okay, I ran out of time. I'm sorry, guys, I didn't fulfill that question very good. I'll think of the answer.
It's tough to go first.
I know it's tough, but I apologize.
Well, that was one question. That was question number one, but it also had where you state your name and why you're running for the position, sort of as an introduction.
It's all in
She did
90
that.
seconds?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Okay, we were all good. Okay, we're all good. Okay, all right, all good. Okay, thank you.
So now, thank you. We're going to go over to Mr. Bjorklund. Is that, yes? All right, did you want me to repeat it, or you got it? Okay, go right ahead.
They printed it out for me. Okay, my background, I spent almost 10 years in the military, and I flew for 30 years for United Airlines, and I was all over the world, and I saw a lot of things that were good, and I saw some things that weren't good, and so that impacted on how I was looking at what was going on in Cheyenne. I've got hardware stores. My dad and I did a hardware store in Douglas. We expanded it from 7,500 feet to 28,000 feet. And then Dorothy and I bought the store here in Wheatland in 2002, and I was an absentee owner. And then it became time to come up here and run the store. So I'm concerned about some of the things that are going on in the country, and I looked at the state, and I'm concerned about some of the things that are happening in the state. And I think I can make a positive impact on some of those things. So that's why I'm running. As far as the platform, there isn't anything in the Republican platform that I disagree with. So I can go right down the line and say, yep, I agree with that.
Okay, so we'll go on to Mr. Johnston. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. This is great to see everybody, and having informed voters is paramount to keep our country going. My name's Eric Johnston, candidate for Senate District 6. Wyoming native, Platte County ties, 100 years. I'm an Army veteran, U.S. Army, retired engineer from oil and gas industry, and currently a farmer outside of Wheatland. I hope you remember me as your former county commissioner, and as commissioner, I worked to secure funding for our courthouse renovation, the 4-H building, and every municipality in the county to work on their specific needs that they got to choose. I'm concerned with Wyoming's future, and so that's why I'm running. I'm concerned with Wyoming's future. I'm a guardian of local control, and I want to represent all of Senate District 6, and including not just Platte County, but rural eastern Laramie County. So The Republican Party platform, a couple of things that resonate, that was the word, resonate with me. Local control. I've shown that I do like local control. I've worked for the county. Fiscal conservative. It's pretty easy when you're a Platte County Commissioner because you don't have a whole bunch of money to spend. But, and energy independence. I said former oil and gas. I realize the importance of the energy industry in general, all the families and jobs and revenue that comes to the state, and that's what I'm really wanting to support that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Love, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Platte County Republican Party and the Platte County School Districts for hosting this evening. It's a great forum. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see such a great crowd this evening. My name's Taft Love. I'm running for Senate District 6. And I'm running for Senate District 6 because I have a lot of concerns about the way things are being handled in Wyoming. And I think we can be a lot more responsible with what we have and build a much better future. For 30 years, I've listened to the same complaints from our citizens about not being able to educate their children here and keep their children here. And I think we have to make that a priority after listening to it for 30 years. And so that's one of the things I intend to focus on. And education is part of our platform. It's been dear to me. I served 10 years on the LCSD2 board, and we achieved a lot of different things in that time. As we move forward, I would like to bring a lot of those accomplishments to the state level because I think there are a lot of those things that fit the state. And we really need to focus on putting our money and resources on the student so that we get a better product. What are we asking for out of education? That's educating children. And in doing so, we're trying to create young adults that are going to go into the workforce and be productive and understand their civic duty, which is another part of our platform that I'm very proud of. That civic responsibility, we must go back to teaching that in our school districts. That way we have a good understanding and an informed population that can work well with us to maintain the heritage and the truths that we all know as growing up and living and working here in Wyoming. There's a couple other reasons I want to run. I think we've gotten really heavy on regulatory burden. We talk a lot about property tax, and as taxes go in Wyoming, we are one of the lowest burdened populations in the country. In fact, we are the lowest in the lower 48 states. But our regulatory burden is tremendous, and it leads to higher property values through regulatory control. And by reducing regulations, we can reduce the cost of housing. If we reduce the cost of housing, the property taxes go down.
Sorry, it's working. Thank you, Mr. Love. Okay, Mr. Smith, go right ahead.
All right, well, howdy, and thank you for having us. I've met a lot of you. I've wore out a set of boots walking Wheatland, and it's been my privilege. My name is Darren Smith, and I'd like to earn your vote tonight. I grew up in Rock Springs, Wyoming, fighting for my lunch money. Then I went to the University of Wyoming on a wrestling scholarship, and where I met my beautiful wife, Alicia, right here in the crowd. Can you wave, Alicia, right here? Just wave real fast. There you go. And she's with 3 of our 5 children. Anyway, we raised our family in southeast Wyoming, and we have 5 kids, and I am an attorney. I know, I hate them too, mostly, right? But you need some good attorneys out there. I spent 12 years working with the Christian Broadcasting Network, and I've been on every continent but Antarctica with them. Then I went to work for the last 6 years. I've been working with the Family Research Council. It's an organization that fights for policy that protects families and freedom. And then about 8 years ago, I noticed that nobody was standing up to fight Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney coming into our state, I knew what she was about. Everybody else eventually figured out what she was about. But no one was standing up to say, hey, we're not going to have an outsider come in. We're smart enough to lead ourselves. But so with that, Proverbs 20 verse 6 says that every man will proclaim how good he is, but but a faithful man who can find. Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm the right man for this job, but don't take my word for it. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has endorsed me because this race is that important. And even a child is known by his ways, and I'm a known figure. I'm a conservative. I fight for the right issues. Ever since I got into politics, I've been on the right side of the issues. I helped stop the crossover. I actually was instrumental from a citizen standpoint in pushing the legislature to pass the anti-castration law, and I'm a fighter, and I want to fight for you. And so that's why I'm running, and I also have a vested interest, and I have a big family that I'd like to see thrive in this state. Also, 8 of the 9 conservative legislators in the Senate have also endorsed me because they needed some help. They need somebody to help them fight, and I'm going to fight for you. And also, Gun Owners of America has endorsed me, so I'm the 2A guy that will fight for you. So with that, there's a question on here. I got 30 seconds. It basically is what are the 2 issues about the platform that I care about? Well, first is life. Pro-life. I believe that life is number 1, that we have to protect life from conception to death. And the number 2, of course, is the Second Amendment. And look forward to spending time with you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, Mr. Toriani, it's to you.
Well, it didn't take Darren very long to talk about Trump's endorsement. So, listen, my name is Mark Toriani. I'm not jealous. My name is Mark Toriani. My family and I run a cattle ranch in southeast Wyoming. I'm going to start out from the start here by saying I'm not from Colorado. Okay, I have been in Colorado like many of you, but for between 25 and 30 years, I worked and lived overseas, dragging my family around with me every 2 to 3 years to a new place, building telecom networks that served the U.S. government, contractors that served our troops, our allies, and their citizens. I did own property with my wife in Colorado, as we did also in Arizona and Texas. We no longer own that property in Colorado. We don't own the property in Arizona anymore. When we got back to the U.S. after that long stint away, we decided that Colorado was not the place that we wanted to be. We were never there long enough to get driver's licenses or thankfully not even pay property tax, or not property tax, but income tax. So I wanted to clear that up because I think there's quite a few people and some misinformation that's been out there in terms of where I've been and where I come from. From a standpoint of why am I running? Well, I recognize after spending that much time overseas and having been throughout the entire 50 U.S. states, also working in telecoms, how special a place that Wyoming is. It reflects the values that I and my family believe in from a standpoint of conservative values. I believe it's worth fighting for. I'm very concerned about Wyoming turning into Colorado. I see a lot of things happening in and around Laramie County that many of the people at this table here with me don't see a problem with, that relate to water or electricity prices going up because of solar and wind turbine installations, and also because of, I would call it a relaxing against the recommendations of the water state engineers' property designations of how big land plot should be in terms of their consumption of water and the type of projects that Wyoming brings in here. So that's the primary reason that I'm running. It's captured in the platform that we've developed called Let's Keep Wyoming, Wyoming. You don't need to be here 30, 40, 50 years to recognize how special a place that Wyoming is. And a lot of people who have been here are involved with the permission for a lot of these projects that I just spoke about. So. From a standpoint of the platform, as Gary said, I agree 100% with the platform. What I think is missing from the platform, and I think should definitely be added, is an integrity and honesty component to the platform, so that anybody who runs for the Republican Party does not take money from PACs or parties, organizations from outside of Wyoming. I think I'm the only candidate on this table tonight. They can say I have not taken any political action committee money. The little money that I did receive from the Wyoming Stock Growers Association has been returned to them, to the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust. The financing of this platform, this campaign that I'm running under, has been done by a few multi-generational Wyoming families, thankfully, and from myself and from my family members. So I have not taken any money. You don't have to worry about me not fighting for you. I will fight for you every day, in session and outside of session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Okay, so for question number 2, we're going to start over here with Mr. Bjorklund and move across the table. So, question is, just over 2 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, declaring that the constitutional right to abortion no longer exists. State legislatures have become the arbiters of abortion access. With this in mind, please tell us when you think life begins and where you stand on abortion access.
I gotta need that on first. I think it was a good plan that they got rid of it out of the federal government and they brought it to the states and let the states make the decision. As far as when life begins, it begins at conception and it ends at natural death. And what exceptions would I make as far as allowing an abortion or someone having an abortion? I think if the mother's life is at risk, you need to do that. And I think if a woman has been raped, I can't see making her give birth to a rapist or to that. So that's where I stand on that. The rest of the time, I don't think that you should be able to have an abortion for recreational sex. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnston, go ahead.
All right. The Dobbs decision was good to bring this issue back to the states. We currently have our Wyoming laws under statute 35-6, and it gives some exceptions for, as Mr. Bjorklund said, some of those are exceptions. I am pro-life, and the laws are the current laws. I think that in the Wyoming Constitution, that's Article 1, Section 38. That's where I think if we need to make any further progress, we need to go back. I think there's a section in there that's hanging us up in the courts, but currently it's in the courts, and I support the Wyoming Constitution, and I am pro-life.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Mr. Love, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I am pro-life. I am endorsed as a pro-life member. I'm really glad this is part of our platform, and it's something we need to uphold. One of the things Wyoming has struggled to do is pass good, effective anti-abortion regulations and legislation. And some of these issues in our legislation that are holding us up, we need to get past those. We need to find leaders that are willing to make good strides. And even if it's incremental success, if we can make an 80% margin and we can save those lives, that is something we must do. It depends on us and our ability to make those strides forward. And then we can have the tough decisions and the tough conversations about how we get to at natural death and no exceptions. But until then, we need to do everything we can to have good positive legislation that causes anti-abortion laws so that it can't be used as a birth control, that it can't be used as a next day option. We have to work together to make these things happen. I'm proud of our platform, and I will stand and fight for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm 100% pro-life from conception to death, no exceptions. With that said, in Wyoming, we have had, since the Dodd case, we had a legislation that immediately was implemented that really restricted abortions. However, our court has usurped that, and we have renegade judges in the state, and they have actually stayed that. So right now, abortions are still taking place in Wyoming, and they will until that case is actually heard by the Wyoming Supreme Court. So we actually need to look at the way that we select our judges in the state, because the way we select our judges, it filters down into liberal judges. That's not the question. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm telling you, when you elect me, we're going to start changing some things. We're going to have an elected attorney general, and we're going to change the way we select judges. We have to do that. Otherwise, we're going to pass good laws, and the courts are going to legislate from the bench, and that's what's happened here. Nationally, Dobbs is a mixed bag. Dobbs is it's a mixed bag because here's why. There are states that abortions have increased. Yeah, it's decreased in places like Texas and elsewhere, but it's increased in New York and California. So yeah, abortions are down, but we can do better. We've got to work to make this entire country a country that honors life.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, Mr. Toriani, go ahead.
Well, this is pretty simple for me. I believe in the sanctity of life, not only from a standpoint of when conception occurs, but also at death. I am the first candidate that was recognized by Wyoming Right to Life and endorsed by Wyoming Right to Life for my beliefs. I do believe that the Roe versus Wade decision, the Dobbs decision, was correct in pushing it back to the states. As Darren said, we have to get down to the actual nuts and bolts of how judges are selected in this state, moved away from a committee type approach to where there is some accountability and some, we'll call it verification of those judges before they're appointed, much like it is to the Supreme Court in the United States. That's not the case today in Wyoming. So if there was a vetting of judges before they were appointed, both at the Supreme Court and other levels in Wyoming, then we likely wouldn't have this problem today. So that has to change.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Ms. Withers, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the question. As a mom and a grandma, I am absolutely pro-life. Every day that state statute sits there on the judge's desk is another day that an abortion occurs. We've got to really create good legislation that will pass the test. Excuse me. That will pass the test. That we have to get something on the books. This absence of a great state statute that being enacted, we're losing lives every day. We've got to have strong statesmen in legislature that will be able to do that. The other concern is about what the other states are doing around us while we're waiting for the judges to decide for our state. One of them is the SHIELD law. The SHIELD law will protect anyone who wants to go into a different state to have an abortion from prosecution. Colorado is enacting that. That's scary that we're going to start having bordering states that's going to enact SHIELD laws while we're waiting for our state statutes to be enacted. Another one is Colorado and Minnesota are allowing nurse practitioners to issue and prescribe abortion pills. We've got to get on this topic, and we have to get on it hard and fast to make sure that Wyoming unborn is protected all the way to natural death. We've got to protect our citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Withers. All right, going to question number 3. This will start with Mr. Johnston. So it's about 3,400 residential properties in Wyoming are in foreclosure because of skyrocketing property taxes, especially for people on fixed incomes. What solution can you offer for this predicament?
Well, so property taxes in general, the skyrocketing part. In the last 10 years, we had 4 years that the property tax went down, 4 years that it was up, and the last 2 years it was way up. And so I want to be careful with what we do with the property tax of just slashing, because the property tax is a local tax. The commissioners, the town councils are terrified at what's going to happen if we cut property tax. And if property tax goes away, is it backfilled? When it's backfilled, it comes from the state, and now you have the state people in Cheyenne legislating on how much we're going to be able to spend on a fire district. I want local control. So this is a very complex issue. They've spent all session working on it, and they came up with 3 bills. They did address one of these for the 65-25 that will come into play, but this is very complicated, and I just hope that everybody realizes, be careful what you wish for on services, and I want to pay for services that I want and not have Cheyenne tell me what I can't do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Love.
Thank you very much. 3,400 residential properties in Wyoming under foreclosure. I think that has to do with property tax in some situations. A lot of times, though, I think it has to do with the failed policies of our current leadership in Washington, D.C. And we need to, as a state, push back and make sure that our voice is heard and that we elect good, sound people to our legislature and state offices so that we can have that strong voice. Last year, 2 years ago now, I guess, we did a really good job when we put Harriet Hageman there, and she is a fighter. She is working hard every day for us, and I think that is being handled on that end, and I think there's still strides to be made there in leadership positions for Wyoming. And so keep that in mind as you're going to the ballot box. The property tax issue here is very temperamental. As I said earlier, we're the lowest tax state in the lower 48. And so as we think about where our tax resources come from and go to, your school boards are funded that way, your school districts, your education, your county commissioners, your city councils. A lot of your infrastructure comes from there. Those are all very vital. And as Platte County really is limited on its resources. And so I think a broad cut of property tax might be an issue. However, for our elderly and disabled, it would be very easy to turn out Was that me? Stop? Oh.
Okay. Mr. Smith, yes, you go ahead, sorry.
Okay, you guys can hear me. Great, great. All right, well, I think a good portion of those folks that are losing their homes are seniors, and we can do better as a state. We just absolutely can. Just give you the macro on this. In the last 20 years, the spending at the state level has grown by over 400%. Property taxes have grown by 300%, but wages, income, so forth like that, teacher, doctor, so forth, have only grown by 100%. So we have a lot less paycheck, we have a lot more regulation, and we have a lot more taxes. So we can fix some of those things. There's lots of studies out there. There's lots of ways to do it. Everybody says, "Oh, we'll lose our." By the way, that's just a smokescreen. The lobbyists for the tax group they were saying, "Oh, you're going to take our fire and you're going to take our sheriffs." No, we will not. We can reduce property taxes, and at some point, if we get a good game plan, we can even eliminate them. We have a $28 billion surplus in this state. $28 billion with a B. It's all a matter of how you allocate those resources. By the way, there's a tax plan out there, and if you go to wytaxreform.com, and it's just talking about helping people with the surplus. If we just have a surplus from year to year, let's deal with the property tax problem with a portion of the surplus, and it would work. We just have to get a plan together and make it happen. But for seniors, especially those in fixed income, we need to help you right away. We can do better, and we'll put our minds together right away when we get in there and make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Toriani, go ahead.
Let me say the obvious. Nobody who's worked their entire life and paid off a mortgage should have to worry about losing their house. All right? So the elderly shouldn't have to. The folks that served our country, all the veterans shouldn't have to, who are limited incomes due to any reason, should not have to worry about losing their house because of higher property taxes. Equally, farmers and ranchers should not have to worry if someone sells out next to them and subdivisions are built that the valuation of their properties are going to go up, even if they have some of it under ag status. There's a very simple solution to this. We do have a very large sovereign fund. I think it is $28 billion. We need to separate education out from the local property tax by setting up a trust, as Texas has, for education, in full or part, to be determined, so that there is the levity and there is the room to ensure that our children continue to have a good education. We do spend quite a bit on education in this state, but the results unfortunately aren't what they are. And to turn that power over in terms of the trust, the money that's allocated from the education trust, managed by the same people who manage the sovereign fund, to local levels. So they determine how the money is spent on education and what's in the curriculum and what resources are needed on a local level, not somebody sitting down in Cheyenne. Equally, I think when we do that on both those levels, there is room for cutting back property taxes. I propose that valuations are based on what you built or bought your property at. That takes the assessor equation out, and also from a standpoint, you won't have to worry about if someone overpays for a property next to you.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Go ahead, Ms. Withers.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to look at it in two folds. The first fold is how would you solve it for the next couple of years? I agree with let's extend the cap that we have at 4% and make it permanent. Don't set it at 2026. We need to see what happens on the implications of the exemptions that we have approved, and they're in the process and it's going through the government. During this time, I want to take a look at a radical idea of taking the 4-cent sales tax and giving it back to the counties and municipalities. Let them decide how they're going to fund education, how they're going to fund their communities, and eliminate property tax. It's a radical idea. It's a fresh idea. And there's a lot of things that have to be built on that, and there's a lot of complexities I totally understand. But we have to really look at this differently. We've been giving the same answers, and we've just been modifying them only slightly. We really need to come up with a different type of fresh perspective of how we address the property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Withers. All right, let's go around the table to Mr. Bjorklund.
It's just not right that somebody's lived in a house for 40 years and all of a sudden they're losing their house because they can't pay the property tax. And people over in Jackson have had a real problem with it because the guy's been there forever, and he paid $20,000 for his house, and now that they're valuing it at over $1 million, and he's having to pay tax on it. That's just not right. So one of the things that I've thought about is that your tax is based upon what you paid for the house when you bought it. And if you want to put a cap, then you put a cap, but you can't raise it by more than 3% a year, or 3% over how many years. That's debatable. But you've got to come up with a way to do that. There was discussion about taking it back and saying that the value of the housing is what it was pre-COVID, because it's post-COVID that everything's skyrocketed. So if you take it back to the value of your house pre-COVID, and then you put a cap on how much they can raise the rate on it, and if a guy's a senior at some given point, or he's a disabled veteran or something like that, maybe you freeze it, period. There's no increase. But I think there's a number of ways that we can do that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bjorklund. All right, so the fourth question, sorry about that, is going to start with Mr. Love. Governor Gordon believes he has the constitutional right to veto flawed legislation. In your opinion, was HB 0125, repealing gun-free zones and preemption amendments, flawed legislation? How do you feel about gun-free zones and the Second Amendment? Please elaborate.
Thank you for the question. As a Second Amendment person, I am a life member of the NRA. I'm the only person on this board whose livelihood has been tied for my entire adult career to the ownership and use of firearms. I own an FFL SOT. I am a firearms manufacturer based out of Cheyenne. It's called Mill Iron TJ Armory. You can look it up on social media if you'd like. Second Amendment is near and dear to me, and more so than most, because my family's made a living off of it. Repealing the Gun-Free Zones Act should have been simple. I see no reason that should not have just been signed and moved on. We removed gun-free zones, so I testified in the House Education Committee on a School Safety and Security Act back in 2017, where we finally passed the legislation that allowed teachers and other faculty to carry in school at the direction of the school board. We have response times in rural Wyoming that are horrific for police to try to get there if we have a safety issue at school. In doing so, we also agreed as a school board to remove all gun-free zone signs from our school properties because we don't want people there thinking we don't have guns. Even if nobody's ever approved, why would you give them a target? That's exactly what those signs mean. The governor, I believe, was flawed in vetoing that, and I believe we should run it again and try to get it passed.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Well, this might get a little repetitive, but of course I'm for repealing gun-free zones. I mean, we're just making the most precious and vulnerable amongst us the biggest target, because that's where the creeps are going to go, right? So we've got to repeal that. I said earlier, Gun Owners of America has endorsed me. I'm the only one up here with that endorsement. It's a great endorsement to have. I'm 100% 2A. I'll tell you quickly, we have a daughter who's a first grade teacher in Rollins, and she can shoot well. In fact, I pity the person that she shoots at. She got a Springfield Hellcat 9mm for her birthday recently, and I couldn't think of a better, more responsible person on the planet to have a weapon in a school than our daughter, Katie. I know that my wife would agree. She's smiling over there. But really, we can do so much better. We need to repeal those gun-free zones, and then we need to train and arm the right people in there to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. And I'll yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Toriani.
Good. Well, I'll make it very simple. I'm very firm on the Second Amendment. And I think everybody in this forum tonight, everybody has a right to self-defense. And in what Governor Gordon did, he actually endorsed that people do not have the right to self-defense in certain environments. From a standpoint of my belief in the Second Amendment, I'm probably the only person sitting on this table who's gone through the arduous restrictions, or not the arduous process, I'll call it, of getting the right to bear arms overseas, where it's much more difficult than it is in Wyoming and the United States. So from that standpoint, I'll pass on to Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Go ahead, Ms. Withers.
Thank you. Yes, Governor Gordon was flawed in his veto. He was supporting the federal legislation that was glossing over a problem, or what they thought was addressing a problem, and it did little to do that. In fact, it maybe made too many people comfortable in their schools that nobody was carrying, and we wouldn't have had as much tragedies if we never did enacted that legislation. I am for a gun-free zone in the schools. I think it is the right to bear arms, but I also think it's a right of the quality of life what we have in Wyoming. It's who we are. We carry guns for our safety and for our protection. It's woven into our DNA. And so we should have that right, and it should not be circumvented by federal legislation or the governor's veto.
Thank you, Ms. Withers. Go ahead, Mr. Bjorklund.
House Bill 0125 was not flawed legislation. It was good legislation, and it should have been passed. Gun-free zones are an invitation to the criminal element. It tells everyone that there's nobody to stand up to him. For an example, the killing that happened at a theater in Colorado, the guy that committed that drove past 3 other theaters that were showing the same movie, but he went to the one that was a gun-free zone. So I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and gun-free zones should be done away with.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorklund. Mr. Johnston, go ahead.
Well, there's not going to be too much differentiation from the group here this evening on this one. As far as the Constitution and Second Amendment, when I held my hand up as a second lieutenant to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Second Amendment is right there, and I fully support our right to bear arms. So on the gun-free zones, I like the idea of teachers that so desire to be trained and to be able to carry legally in that setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. So for question number 5, we'll start with Mr. Smith. The question is, it has been proven that electronic voting machines can be hacked. Mail-in ballots and drop boxes make it easier to commit voter fraud. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is election security? What common sense measure would you support to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat?
That's a great question. Yeah, we know that there's voter fraud in America. I mean, it's just on its face, we know that. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. By the way, Platte County has done a great job. There's lots of people in here that have done a great job of showing us how the voter machines can be hacked, and they clearly can. And what are we going to do? So really, the more you look at it, probably the best solution is to go to hand counts. In the event that we can't do that, then we have to make sure that the machines are tested in the meantime, and that we keep a close eye on it. And right now in Laramie County, as the chair of our party knows, there's a big to-do because the machines that the clerk was supposed to test were not tested right according to the statute. That's a big problem, and so there's a lawsuit being filed. Of course, he's the chair of the party, and so he's going to be in that lawsuit. But really, it's a big deal that the clerk would not calibrate the machine according to the statute. So those things have got to be fixed. And you know what? We need clerks that are accountable in this state and other states. I think in this state, the clerks should report to the Secretary of State. Really, they don't. They're elected officials. We also need to be able to recall elected officials that don't do their job. This clerk in Cheyenne refused to do her job, and there's nothing that we can do about it. We should be able to recall her immediately. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Toriani.
I think this is very simple. If a country that has many problems across the board, like France, can manage to have an election with paper ballots and count all ballots within 24 hours the same day, why can't the United States or Wyoming? All right? We don't need electronic machines. What we need is full accountability in the election system and have a process which counts ballots that are turned in by every individual who's a citizen based on tough and scrutiny of people that are coming in to vote. One of the problems that we have in the United States right now is illegal aliens in many states are being handed driver's licenses, and many of them are being automatically registered to vote because of that process. We need to make sure that doesn't spill over into Wyoming, and we need to move to paper ballots so they can be counted in the same day that the election occurs, and results can be communicated to the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Go ahead, Ms. Withers.
I agree. Whether you're counting them by hand or by the electronic machines, you got to make sure they're accountable, that they are working properly, and that's the integrity of elections. We also have to make sure there isn't voter fraud. That's part of our problem with when we have voter fraud happening is these people that just are imaginary, voters coming up to vote. Whether illegal immigrants are doing it, whether they're registering voters at the Driver's License Bureau in other states, we got to combat that here in Wyoming and stay true to only an American citizen can vote. And we have to validate who that ID is and who that person is before they use whatever mechanism we choose.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Withers. Mr. Bjorklund?
Well, it's been proven that the voting machines can be hacked. And the interesting thing is that the companies that own the voting machines require that the people using them allow the company to have 24/7 access to that machine. That speaks volumes on fraud potential. Mail-in ballots and drop boxes, it's easier, definitely easier to commit fraud. I'm against automatic mail-in ballots. So for 5 years after I left Colorado and came back to Wyoming, I got a ballot from Colorado saying, here's your ballot to vote. And I finally called them on the phone because they wouldn't respond to the mail and said, stop this. So, and ballot drop boxes are just an invitation to drop a whole bucket into them. It's been done before. They've got videos of it, so it happens. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is election security? That's a 10. And we need to do everything that we can to make sure that the people that vote are allowed to vote. It means you got a local ID, not an ID out of Colorado. And you got to be sure that they're a local resident and they are not here illegally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorklund. Mr. Johnston, to you.
Trust in the system is what we all, we have to have it in the U.S. I mean, let's say we're playing the basketball game right over there and you see an obvious foul call and everybody's just going, what the heck? Well, you know, when you no longer trust the way things are going, things start to crumble. So we have to have election integrity, starting with U.S. citizenship, going to photo ID that wasn't given to you as you came across the border. I mean, a true, what do we have to do to get our driver's license? We have to prove it. Paper ballots, that gives us a receipt. I like the in-person voting. I think that we should kind of limit and be a little bit more careful on our early voting. I think absentee ballots need to be requested. And so Platte County, you all, Ms. Houchins, Ms. Butler, Ms. Kaufman, you all have got me thinking. I'm a late adopter, but there is potential for fraud, especially in the software, and I really think that we can do better and Platte County can lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Mr. Love, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So it has been proven that they can be hacked. Platte County GOP, I believe Jill Kaufman led the way and helped facilitate a couple individuals that came into Platte County and showed us exactly how the software could be manipulated and how it could change votes in an election. So I think we have to be really cautious in that. I don't know that hand counting ballots, because of the cost to counties, is exactly the way to go, but we can take a step backwards in technology. We all remember how we used to fill in the dot for the test in school, and those are pretty easily read with a photo eye, and there's not a big software program that goes along that can be manipulated. And so there's still some very efficient ways that we can do this without allowing in the voter fraud or the issues that come along with these software companies. Requiring IDs is great. Requesting for mail-in ballots, we have to remember our military personnel, sometimes they have to call for a mail-in ballot. Sometimes they can't be home to vote, and there's not an opportunity for them to vote. We have other individuals in that same situation. We need to be cognizant of that when we think through this process. But there are errors that occur. Our voting machines in Laramie County failed a test on Monday at 8:30 a.m. I made the clerk's office aware of that. They did not correct those issues. They ran a test that was not compliant with the statute. And in doing so, we were required to file a complaint on Tuesday. And that complaint was received by the DA, and the DA is taking action to help correct the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Love. All right, question number 6 will be the final question for you all, and we're going to start with Mr. Toriani. Governor Gordon believes that CO2 should be sequestered and captured. Do you? Based on your own research into weather and climate, what are your beliefs about so-called green energy versus organic or fossil fuel energy sources, and which direction should we be going regarding energy sources in Wyoming?
Well, this is an easy one for me as someone who's invested both directly and indirectly in energy, all sectors, over 30 years, and has also spent some time in the Middle East in terms of where a lot of hydrocarbons are. I do not believe that solar and wind are viable energy sources. I think they're a great deal of a waste of taxpayer money. Wind projects in particular would not exist without heavy subsidies. Solar is fine for a farm or a ranch or on top of someone's residential house. If that's your prerogative, you want to put on solar on top of your house, or you want to put it on your solar ranch because it's hard to get electricity to a stock tank or something like that, that's perfectly fine. But we as taxpayers should not be paying for tax credits for energy companies or private investors who essentially are taking those tax credits from your pockets. Both wind and solar have a terrible fully loaded cost when compared to our natural sources here in Wyoming, like coal or oil or natural gas, in terms of both electricity and energy generation. And it's a big farce that Governor Gordon believes that he's doing something on behalf of the earth when the producer of those two components, solar and wind, is China, which is adding on a new coal plant, electricity plant, every 2 weeks. And we're in the process in this country under the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, of closing down our electricity generated by coal. So from that standpoint, I'm not a supporter of his net zero or negative CO2 program.
Thank you, Mr. Toriani. Ms. Withers, to you.
I am not a supporter of the governor doing this and going forward with this. I think that should be private money. It should be the innovation. America Ingenuity can do it all they want. But for us to take it out, we really got to protect our legacy energy sources. We fuel America, and we fuel them on diesel, gas, and coal. And we've got to keep that legacy strong and protect those resources because it's cleaner energy, it's better energy, it's more efficient. And to go into these other things, the government are endorsing the solar farm or the wind turbine, they're fine. They're fine for private investment. And those that want to do it with private property rights, all good for you. That's your prerogative. But for the governor to go out there and do that on our dime or looking at that, it's a waste of time.
Thank you, Ms. Withers. Mr. Bjorklund?
How many of you remember in grade school that plants live off of carbon dioxide? Anybody remember that? So the very idea that Governor wants Wyoming to be carbon negative is ludicrous. The 50% increase in CO2 levels over the last 200 years are called of great concern by the lying fearmongers in Washington. In the same 200-year period, the green area of the earth has increased by an area the size of the Amazon rainforest. So, in my opinion, we should be increasing CO2 levels, not decreasing them. And green energy does nothing for us. It's only good because the government subsidizes wind and solar, and they tax oil and coal. And while I'm on that subject, the last coal-fired power plant in Wyoming was built in 2011 in Gillette. China, on the other hand, starts construction on a new coal-fired power plant every week. Think about that.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorklund. Mr. Johnston?
Well, coal is the backbone of the grid, and it's a national security issue. So it's the lowest cost feedstock. It's the most efficient. These other, if we're on a level playing field, the wind and solar would not stand a chance in just pure energy density. So if CO2 is a problem, well, to some people, Wyoming can benefit from this by, I'm not talking about taking CO2 out of just thin air. If people like green electrons, which I can't tell if those are green or coal-fired electrons on those lights, but if they want them and they think that they're good, let's have Wyoming do a point capture of CO2 on that flue right out there at Laramie River Station, and so we can then sell our electrons as being green. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston. Go ahead, Mr. Love.
Thank you very much. The legacy industries of coal, oil, and gas in Wyoming are important to us. They've helped build us. They've made us thrive for decades, and I think we have to continue to support those. It's a shame that since the Obama administration, we've lost tens of thousands of jobs in this state in the coal industry, and the oil is suffering right now due to failed policies of the current administration. We have to fight as Wyoming residents to bring back those energies, and we have to do it together. And I'm willing to help do that for you as the Senate District 6 rep for this area in Cheyenne. I think making us carbon negative, we're already carbon negative. If you look at the output of Wyoming, I thought that was a crazy statement when I heard it. He talked about making us carbon zero. We're already carbon negative. We have more green surface area than we produce CO2 already today. So what are we going to do? Sell it to California, who's not? We really have to be cognizant of what we're being told by our politicians because they're trying to make money. And those are things that we have to work on together, and I'm willing to work on with you.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Well, it's real simple. The government shouldn't pick winners and losers, and that's what the green energy deal is. It's just not viable without subsidies, and so we shouldn't. I mean, it's not even if you want to waste your money or spend your money. And by the way, there's a place. There's a place for solar. There's a place for wind. I was on a wind turbine, the board of directors of this little wind turbine company, and their energy efficiencies are just too low. It'll never work. It'll never be enough energy for us. But our product and the best source out there that I know of is coal. And we need to defend coal. I'll fight for you on the coal issue. Our governor should have sued the federal government 3 months ago when they said that they were going to ban the sale of coal leases. They're going to stop the sale of coal leases. That's really attacking our state. He's done really nothing. He's hired some consultants and different things, but we should have hit him in the mouth. The reason that we don't export coal out of the state of Washington is because in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, we didn't have good leadership. If we'd had good leadership and a governor that understood the macro dire need to protect coal, we would have sued and we would have got a port there. But now there's no port there because the Supreme Court dismissed it because that port was bought and sold for something else. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it's a big deal. So I'll fight for you. That is just it's absurd that happened. That now if we want to get our coal to China, we have to go to Canada to do so, or ship it through Canada. So with that, that's our product, and I will fight for coal here in Platte County. Thank you.
I did. Over here, Richard. Okay. Thank you, candidates. How about a round of... This is... Like I say, it's very tough to be up here, so in an hour, they'll be outside for meet and greet. You can have some questions with them, some talking time with them. But let's give them a breather, and we'll bring up the county commissioners here in 5 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute break, please. Attention, attention Kmart shoppers. If I could have you return to your seats now, please. We'll have the county commissioners start here in a minute. Yeah. Kayla, Jeb, could we have you come up front? While you're finding your seat, I have a couple of announcements to make. We recently sent out postcards from the Platte County GOP to the public. On one side, you have the chance to take a survey, figure out that QR code, and if you haven't already done that, we hope you will. It's only a couple of questions. And next is a reminder that this Saturday, same time, same place, 6 o'clock at this auditorium, this beautiful auditorium, there will be a free screening of Let My People Go, followed by an interactive session with the film's creator, Dr. David Clemens. So hope to see you here. Doors open at 5:30 for that. And then last announcement, next Tuesday, August the 13th, the Platte County Chamber of Commerce and the Platte County Economic Development Board are sponsoring a candidates forum to begin at 6 p.m. at the 10th Street Social. The address is 802 10th Street, the old Aloxite building here in Wheatland. So it's another opportunity to get to know the candidates, and that is Tuesday, August 13th at 6 p.m. Thank you. Are we ready?
And I
Not
left
quite.
the name tags at home, so that's the handwritten.
I didn't notice anything, teacher.
Okay, so for these questions, for the candidates running for Platte County Commissioner, we're going to start with Ms. Mantle. So question number 1, what is your vision for the future of Platte County?
Okay, am I on? Hello, I'm Kayla Mantle, and I'm a current county commissioner here serving my first term. And searching re-election, my vision for the future of Platte County is partially based on economic growth. We want the right growth in Platte County, and you know, the power plant is a huge benefit to Platte County here. However, we also need to plan for our future. The rare earth mineral mine that's planning on coming in, things of that nature, will really be a benefit to Wheatland and surrounding communities, even though it's actually located in Albany County. And also continuing to maintain the infrastructure and roads that we have with the improvements that we are able to do within our budget. And so obviously here in Platte County, we know that we work with a pretty minimal budget here, and we do that pretty successfully. But I do think that we need to plan on future growth here in Platte County, economic growth. It just needs to be the right growth. And so is every business that's gonna come in be the right business? No. But you're still holding up 90 seconds, so I don't know what I'm at, but you know, every business opportunity that we have is not going to be the right opportunity, but we do need to plan for the future for our children, grandchildren, to have a thriving community to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Well, some of the stuff that Kayla talked about, I pretty much agree with, because we have to have a controlled growth somewhat in this county, because, you know, going forward, I don't see cost of goods going down. I don't see cost of living going down. I don't see a lot of those things going down. A lot of it, you know, were handed down from up above, if you will. And so, you know, here we are dealing with it. We've got the ability, you know, in this county, because of the resources that we have here and the people that we have here, to have a steady growth, but in the same sense, we need to keep Platte County, Platte County. We see what's going on south. When you hit Bear Creek and you go south, we see what's happening down there. And I, for one, don't want any part of that. There's a way to have an economic impact in this county without giving up all of those things that you've seen, you know, given up down there. And I want to say thank you for the opportunity to run, but that's kind of what I see as the future of Platte County as far as the economic side, and, you know, to keep educating our kids, turning out good students, and turning out those that, you know, maybe want to come back here once they get their education, because so many of the kids that I graduated with here, there's probably less than a handful here. They graduated high school here, they went off, they built their lives, but, you know, I'm sure it's still home to them, but a tremendous amount of them, you know, never seen the opportunity to come back here and make a go of it, so they just didn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. All right, so for question number 2, we'll start with you, Mr. Baker. Question is, what are the duties of a county commissioner, and for whom does a commissioner work?
Well, not having never been one, but, you know, I look at the county commissioner's job as basically to oversee the county's management and administration, to represent the county's interest at the state and federal level. Managing the county's budget and finances would also be a great part of that job. And who does the commissioner work for? A couple of weeks ago, a gentleman come up to me and said, well, if you get elected, you're going to have to vote for the people that work for you. And I said, you're wrong. And he was kind of taken aback by that. And I said, I have to work for every person in the county, whether they voted for me, whether they didn't, or whether they didn't vote at all. If they live here, they pay taxes here, and they need to be represented. And that's kind of what, you know, I see as the duties of a commissioner, and they work for you. Everybody that lives here, the commissioners work for you. You don't work for the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Go ahead, Ms. Mantle.
So what are the duties of the county commissioners? So this is a two-part question, but our first part of our duties is 90% of what we do is budget related. Creating a balanced budget every single year. Our clerk does a fantastic job of gathering all that information and presenting it to us, and for the commissioners to allocate funds and use the resources that we have in the best way possible by being fiscally responsible. And so that is probably the number one thing that we do. We also supervise road and bridge, maintenance, basically all of the departments that are not elected officials. And so road and bridge is probably our number 2. And for whom does a commissioner work? There's over 8,000 people in Platte County, and so every single person. And like Jeb said, you know, the people that call us are the biggest complainers. You know, nobody ever calls and says you're doing a good job, but you have to remember in the back of your mind that if you're following the rules and regulations set forth, if you are doing the best that you can, then that is the number one part. Sorry, you're, sorry, go ahead. The numbers got changed on me over here. So, yeah, so a county commissioner works for all the people, not just the people that are calling and complaining in their ear. And I think that's one thing that we have to remember, is that the 5 complainers versus the 8,000 people that you're actually representing makes a big difference. And so each and every person given the guidelines that we're given.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. All right, so we're going to start with you again for this next question, question number 3. If elected, what is your plan for communicating with your constituents? Please be as precise and detailed as possible.
So I currently have a Facebook page, an email, and my phone number is out there public. So I am constantly updating on my Facebook page. I post when our meetings are, what the agenda is. My phone number is out there. Anybody is welcome to call me. I currently have gone to meetings. I go to the Fair Board meetings, the Economic Development meetings, the Chamber meetings, the Kiwanis. You know, I try to hit as many different community events as possible so that I can talk to the people that are out there. And so that's kind of the best source of communication. It's really hard because we sit in there in the meetings and, you know, nobody shows up or just a few people show up. And so, but you know that people out there have questions, whether they're just not coming to you, if they don't feel comfortable. And so really being out there, making yourself available. And so I've really worked hard the last 4 years to do that. And I've worked really hard to try and put things out there for the community so that everybody knows what's going on, everything that's happening. We just saw that with the large fires that we had over in the Guernsey area. And we had multiple fires at the same time, but I was constantly trying to update on my Facebook page. I know that everybody doesn't have Facebook, but my phone line is always open. I had several people just call me direct. I'm happy to talk to each and every person.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. Mr. Baker, that same question to you.
Well, I don't have a Facebook page. And I'm not criticizing people that do, because I think it's a great way for people to stay in communication with each other. But when Facebook started becoming what it was not created for, I said, I don't think I ever want to jump in there and play with that. So I've never done it. So, you know, if elected, I've contemplated a different phone, another phone, one that's just dedicated strictly for commissioner affairs and commissioner business, and then, of course, that would be published to where anybody can call. Anybody can call. And that would be like a dedicated line that I would have for commissioner business, commissioner concerns, constituent concerns, and the like. And then, like, you know, Kayla had said, you gotta make yourself available. You gotta be at these things. You gotta go. You gotta talk to people face to face, because to me, that's the best way to do it. You know, it's when a constituent calls and said, hey, can you come out and look at this road, because I've tried to get a hold of such and such, and you don't micromanage at that point, but what you're doing is you're trying to satisfy a taxpayer and a landowner or whoever it happens to be in the county. So if you need to become a liaison, if you will, between that person and whether it's road and bridge or whatever department it may be, then that's your role. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. When you work for people, that's how you do it.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We're going to start with you on this next question, question number 4. What is the role of government?
This one's not terribly hard. Role of government. I believe the role of government at virtually any level. You got to follow the Constitution as it was written. Establish justice, because you have to have that. And through the tax money that comes through and whatnot, infrastructure, and you got to maintain it. Not just throw it up, but you got to maintain it. And then you got to protect from enemies. You know, foreign, south of the border, whatever. You have to do that. And throw education in there, because that's another role of the government that they stepped in a long time ago. And, you know, you got to keep your foot on the gas for a quality education for the kids. And then kind of the last thing is, you know, stay out of the way of small business. Take the red tape off of them, you know, let them sink or swim on their own. Help them get stood up, help them get going, but then don't regulate them to the point of where they can't succeed, or they lose heart, or they lose faith, or they just say, I'm done. I just can't fight it anymore. So stay out of their way and let them succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Ms. Mantle, same question to you.
Okay, my green light was delayed, sorry. So what is the role of government? So this is kind of a broad question from, federal down to us. Obviously, what we do is different than what they do, but all in all, the role of government has several different parts in it. Creating and enforcing laws, maintaining security, whether that be at the border or within the county, promoting economic stability. Governments, they create and implement economic policies to promote economic stability within the counties. And so providing public services, that's probably one of our main ones, is that, the government is supposed to provide public services to citizens, basic needs, whatever that may be, food, shelter, license plates, tags, enforcing laws and regulating services, and then taxation. Obviously, taxation is a huge conversation, but the government is really the one that imposes the taxes, and that comes from a federal level and trickles down through the state and to the counties. And so they impose the taxes on the income and the profit levels of the individuals. And so really that starts at a federal level and comes down to us. So that are kind of the main roles of the government, is to provide the services to the communities.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. We'll start with you on question number 5, which is, are you more of a proponent of meritocracy or of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Please elaborate.
Am I on now? Okay, it just finally came on. So this is kind of a tricky question. I think that there's probably benefits to both. I think that diversity and equity is good. However, I think that in the America that we have, things today are getting a little bit out of control. And so here in the state of Wyoming, I think that we need to stick to our values and our core, and just stick to what we are and what we believe in, especially here at a county level.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. Mr. Baker, over to you.
Well, when it comes to DEI, folks, I'm not a real big fan of that, because I think that, what I've seen in that is there's been, a push to have people promoted and worked up through the system and without merit. They're put there based on a color or a creed or this or that, as opposed to their individual qualifications and merits and education and abilities. I see that as something that really is not part of the county type thing, but yet it's an overhanging issue. And I think as time goes on, you're going to see this more and more and more, because of the agenda that comes from outside of here. I mean, it just doesn't come from here. But so, I got to say, I'm not a big DEI fan. I'm just not. And that's kind of why.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We'll start with you on question number 6, which is, the Wyoming Republican Party platform spells out the timeless truths that guide and direct Republicans. Explain your reasoning for running as a Republican rather than as a Democrat or independent. Specifically, tell us about 1 or 2 truths from the platform that resonate with you.
Well, I guess I started as a Republican because that's what I was born into. A lot of these people in this room knew my dad and what he stood for and how he hung his hat, so to speak. And then it just, everything made sense, you know, on the Republican and or conservative side. Anymore, I don't like to use the term Republican or Democrat. I like to use the term conservative and liberal, because it seems like those inclusive terms are, seem to fit better. And then when you get to the truth from the platform from the Republican Party, you know, there's many that fit. I am a right-to-life guy like the rest of them, although that doesn't fit into the county shell that well. But, you know, the liberties that we have, we need to keep. And the Second Amendment, of course, because that's everywhere. And the sanctity of life, and the fact that we live in an area that, because I've been in other areas, I've traveled in other areas, but you know, this area here it's special, and that's why we need to keep it what it is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Ms. Mantle, over to you.
There we go, turned right on this time. So when we talk about specifically two truths, you know, I've been a registered Republican my entire life, and there's not necessarily two specifically. I resonate with all of them, and so that's kind of tough. You know, economic prosperity, preserving the American values. You know, we want to elect the people that want the America that we want it to be, right? And so Second Amendment rights are obviously very high up on my list. I've been an avid gun owner and hunter my entire life, and so that's really near and dear to my heart. But I would say probably as far as the two between Second Amendment and liberty and economic prosperity.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. And we'll start with you on question number 7, which is, our county pays over $11,000 per year for electronic voting machines, whether or not there's an election during that year. Results of public logic and accuracy testing of the electronic voting machines show that the machines do not meet election guidelines. Knowing about the failure of the public logic and accuracy testing, would you support continuing to use the voting machines, or would you be willing to switch to hand counting for our elections? Please elaborate.
So I have been to all the trainings that, some were trainings on hand counting, and some of them were just discussions on the electronic voting machine. Election integrity and security is of the utmost top priority during election season, obviously. And during those trainings, I have found that, you know, I sat in a room for the hand counting, and there was 7 people at the table. We hand counted 20 ballots, and 5 people at that table made a mistake. And so that was a struggle for me. Do I think that there's vulnerabilities in voting machines? Absolutely. But we have to be able to trust the people that we have in the positions to protect those machines. And so I went down to, we tested ours the other day. We had a public test. It took like 10 hours and tested every single machine, put them under lock and key, and we had no problems. I know Laramie County had a different opinion on that. And so, you know, it is a lot of money to protect these machines, and it's a lot of money to have these electronic voting machines, but I do think that there has to be options for people, whether it's hearing, seeing, things of that nature. You know, paper ballots, I'm a big fan of paper ballots, but the cost and the time that it takes to hand count ballots, hand counting there's no way from Tuesday to Friday when you have to canvass that you would ever get the amount of ballots hand counted accurately in a time frame to get them certified by the canvass board the way that legislation is read at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle. Mr. Baker, same question.
It's looking like a pile of money to take care of electronic voting machines, whether they're used or not, but I understand that a lot of this stuff was mandated through the state. There are the vulnerabilities, but, you know, to a degree, we have to be able to trust the election officials that we have here to facilitate every conceivable possible test that they can run through the election officials, from the flash drives to the structure to how that is done, to know that we don't have an issue. The majority of these machines, I think, that have been an issue have not been around here. Not to say these won't be an issue or haven't been an issue. But it goes back to trust and vulnerability, and it goes back to, we have to have voter integrity, because when somebody votes for somebody, that vote should be cast for that person. And not being able to retrieve the ballots, let's say there's a close election and it's within a certain percentage point, pick one. And you say, well, we need to hand count these ballots. I understand it's mandated from the state, can't touch them. That I don't like, because we should be able to get our hands on these things and put a team of people and say, okay, we've got a contested race or a percentage race right here. We need to verify this. Maybe you run it through another machine first. I don't know exactly what all the systems are in place to do that, but there's got to be a way to address this to where we know that everybody's votes getting counted. And no drop boxes, ever.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We'll start with you on this next question, which will be the last question for you both. Question 8, does Platte County have a revenue problem or a spending problem?
You know, I think a little of both. You know, do we need more revenue in this county? Yeah, we do. There's no question that we do. And there's ways to get that, and we've talked about economic growth and that kind of thing. But I think there's probably there may be some fat to get trimmed here or there. I don't know exactly where. I'm becoming familiar with the budget. I haven't sat in this chair for 4 years. So I don't know the ins and outs of all of that budget stuff. I'm going to tell you that right now. But if elected, day one, now it's time to learn it. Now we got to get involved. Now we got to get the nuts and bolts going and figure out what I need to figure out. I spoke to former county commissioners, and they confided in me. They said, Jeb, nobody ever elected to that position knew that budget before they sat in that chair. You're not going to be any different. So learning curve will have to go straight up, willing to do that, ready to do that, and like to have a look at both sides of this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Ms. Mantle, go ahead.
So we just approved our next fiscal year budget, and usually we start that in May, right around the time when you decide to run. And so when I decided I was going to run, I sat in on every county commissioner meeting up until the time that I was elected. And I think that it's vital that you're there and you're a part of it so that you can see, because everybody wants to sit in this chair and they want to tell you that you overspend or that you can cut in these places, but until you're sitting in this chair, you don't understand what the county budget actually is. And in regards, I do think that it's important that you're there before, during, and after to really understand it. So does Platte County have a revenue problem? Absolutely. We're a hardship county in this state. There's only 3 hardship counties at this time. There was 4, 1 just dropped off. And the reason being is because we're one of the only counties in the state that doesn't have a natural resource of oil, gas, and minerals. And so, yeah, it is hard. You know, we talk about property tax relief, and not to get into that because that's not what this question is about, but, you know, we have to reduce the structural gap between mineral and hardship counties. because the way that those funds are allocated from the state makes us continue to be a hardship county. And so we have a very good budget. We're able to fix the things that need fixed without overspending and just buying tons of new stuff like they do in other counties. And so I definitely think, there is a revenue problem. But our budget is very balanced, very thin, and I don't see a lot of places that we would be able to cut.
Thank you, Ms. Mantle.
Thank you, candidates. How about a hand for them? Thank you. Good job. We're going to set up real quick for the House race candidates. Jeff and Jeremy, would you come on up and we'll get going on that. What was it again? Oh, yes. Are there any candidates for town council here? Would you stand and be recognized, please? There's one. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Okay, we got those two, you two guys. What's the name, sir? Brett Baum. Okay. How do you spell that, Brett? B-A-U-M. Okay. And then we have this gentleman here, Clinton Butler. Correct? Okay. They're running as write-ins for town council. I've asked that you two stick around tonight, and you can be hit up for questions or statements or anything like that. Okay? We up there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're on.
Get started here very quickly, as soon as our timer is here.
We need to talk about the QR codes. They're on this card. You did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pat. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start for these questions for the candidates running for House District number 4. And to each of you, when you answer the first question, please also start by stating your name and why you're running for this position. So we're going to start with Mr. Haroldson for question number 1. What is the role of government?
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you guys so much for coming out this evening. I look out in this room, and this is awesome, because this is America waking up. This is Wyoming saying, hey, you're in. So my name is Jeremy Haroldson. I currently represent you in House District 4 in the Wyoming Legislature, have for 4 years. 2020, I had the opportunity to be one of the pastors in the state of Wyoming when we had Governor Gordon not shut down churches, but shut down churches. And about 3 weeks into that conversation, my blood pressure was rising and frustrations were as well. And I was spending too much time in the emergency room with people that tried to commit suicide, actually, because we're not meant to be alone or isolated. And I said, we got to fix something. And so we, at that point, I called my rep and had a conversation. And out of that, did not really get an answer that I was looking for. So I turned around and ran and was able to take the seat and have been in there ever since. So thank you guys for that. What is the role of government? The role of government is to establish justice, number one. It has to. That's what they're there for. Infrastructure, provide infrastructure, and use infrastructure updates. Everyone likes going down the interstate, not paying tariffs as you go. We want the government to be able to do that. Also is to provide for the defense, foreign and domestic. As we provide for that defense, you have to understand that like what's happening in Texas right now, what's happening in Arizona, that's a complete loss of integrity by our federal government. There's no excuse for that. So it's very important that we do that. Also, constitutionally, education. We have to provide education for our children, and that's vitally important. It's also vitally important that we get to decide what our kids get taught, because that's also something we're seeing. We're seeing federal encroachment upon what the education of our children is. And so the established justice, the infrastructure, foreign and domestic defense, as well as education, those are the roles of government constitutionally required.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. Mr. Thomas, over to you.
I decided to run to give all the communities in rural constituents in District 4 equal representation. I'm a fifth-generation Wyomingite with a wide variety of experience, a lifetime community service. Spent there over 30 years in the fire service and over 15 years in emergency medicine. I've been a member of several civic organizations, I still am. My main goals are to, again, provide equal representation, strengthen and support our first responders, including law enforcement, fire, EMS, which is dear and near to my heart. Support our coal and oil and gas production, lowering or alleviating property taxes, strengthening laws to protect battered women and children, and overhauling our welfare system and addressing the drug problem, and bringing education back to basics and teaching history the way it actually happened. Otherwise, we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes that we made before. Now, what is our role in government? Is obviously legislation, providing security, providing the necessities of life, and following the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We'll start with you for question number 2, which is a 3-part question. Part number 1 is, what are your qualifications for this position? Number 2, what are your weaknesses? And number 3, what is your vision for what you can accomplish if elected?
Sure, give me the long question. Okay. So why am I running for office? I'd like to represent, like I said, every member in Platte County to the best of my ability and make sure everybody has equal representation. Part 2, as I said, I've been in emergency services and civil or civic organizations my entire life. My family, we've all been civil service throughout our entire lives. I'm a retired meat cutter for most of my life, so I know business, agriculture, and my vision for what I'd like to see in Wyoming, or what I'd like to see in Platte County, is better education, better security, and better support for all of our agencies. My weakness is probably computers. That's why I only have a Facebook account and luckily have enough to have an email. But those are probably my weaknesses, is somewhat technology.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Haroldson, go ahead.
Thank you. So the first question is, why are you running for representative in House 4, and what is your greatest qualifications? I believe that there's still work to be done. Over the last 4 years, one of the things you have to understand, let me just give you kind of a 30,000-foot view real quick. Going into this, I thought, we're Republican. I mean, we're the reddest state there is. So there's 62 members in the House of Representatives after the last redistricting. Of those 62, 57 are Republican. So why are we even worried about it, right? There's 57 Republicans and 5 Democrats. So we don't even have a conversation here until you start sitting there and going, 31 of those Republicans voted lockstep with the Democrats. So things like fairness in women's sports, we fought tooth and nail and barely got it through, and it was weakened when it did. What is a Woman Act? So we can finally get rid of this craziness. That couldn't make it through. And so it's like we desperately need true conservative voices in that place. And what's the greatest accomplishment? If you go back and look at the votes, and I challenge you, please do that, you're going to find that I voted on that Republican platform time and time again. Greatest weakness. It takes a lot of time. This is a citizen legislature. That's a full-time job. I pastor a church. I've got 2 kids. It's a wild adventure out there. What am I looking at accomplishing if elected? We're going to continue to fight for the elimination of gun-free zones. We're going to continue to fight for trying to get some economics into our state so we're not boom and bust. Those are a couple of things.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. For question number 3, we're going to start with Mr. Thomas. Would you describe yourself as a proponent of meritocracy or a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I am definitely not a DEI supporter. What you want to do once you're an adult, what you do in your privacy of your own home, that's your business. You knock yourself out. But I agree with the former Senate race representatives, where people are getting promoted and moved into positions of authority and positions of importance who are not qualified, and they're being moved up there on the DEI platform, not by their merits. So I would not be a proponent of DEI.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. And yes, it is a little mixed up, but everybody will get to answer the same question. So, Mr. Haroldson, go ahead.
Thank you very much. DEI, you guys, is dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. If we go and we actually boil that down, what we're finding is something that's undermining the moral fabric of our country. This is very much decision-based. There's an agenda being pushed right now. It's being pushed on our children. It's being pushed on the most, I guess, vulnerable minds. And that is this. There's not a creator. They want kids to know that, right? They want kids to walk in that. Second of all, you are not unique in who you are. And what we're doing is, in this, the DEI actually is going the opposite of what it says it intends to do, and what it does is it creates rifts and divisions. We must get back to a place where you are judged upon the merit of your character and your work ethic. If we can get to that point, we then become great again. Because our founding fathers built this nation upon the ideals and idea that you are going to be taken at the value of your work ethic and what you bring to the table. And we've lost that. And now all of a sudden we're going to take and we're going to judge you based upon the color of your skin, the gender that you decided, or something of that nature. That's not right. So it needs to go back to this idea that the most qualified person gets the position, and work ethic actually is something that we stand upon again in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. We'll start with you for this next question. How would you describe food freedom, and why does it matter?
Thank you. So the Food Freedom Act actually was something that's been kind of a walk-in process in the Wyoming legislature. So there was a time not that long ago where if you had chickens and you wanted to sell the eggs from your chickens to your neighbor, it was illegal. How many people here, don't raise your hands, were illegal, right? I mean, either purchasing or selling those eggs. Or if you had a milk cow and you're like, hey, you know what, that cow's producing 8 gallons of milk a day. Unless you got some incredibly thirsty kids, you're in trouble. You want to sell that milk to your neighbor or to the people at your church or something of that nature. And so Food Freedom Act said, hey, we also don't want it to be a situation where it's an open door where people do foolish things and get people sick, but for generations, farm fresh eggs, farm fresh milk. Hey, you know what? I make some cheese, or I've got some bread products. Food Freedom Act gave the ability for you, the consumer, and for you, the producer, to help benefit your community with garden goods, farm fresh goods. It opened up our farmers markets. It opened up our Facebook marketplaces. It gave you the ability to bake some bread in your kitchen, sell it to your friends and family, and be legal in doing so. Now, if you want to cater a full meal and sell that, you're going to have to get a catering license, and you're going to have to do some of that work. But Food Freedom Act opened your ability to do what we've done for generations in this country and make it legal. Should have been all along.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. Mr. Thomas, to you.
I absolutely agree with the Food Freedom Act. If people aren't allowed to sell their goods to, like Jeremy said, to their neighbors and their friends and their families, less and less people are going to do that. You know, when it comes time when we need to come together as a community, we're not going to have those resources and those assets. So we need to be able to have a trade system within our citizens, within our towns, within our communities. So yes, I absolutely agree with the Food Freedom Act. As also there, I mean, as Jeremy said, there are some rules that you should probably abide by to keep food safety, I mean, obviously. But yes, I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Haroldson, we'll start with you on this one as well. What is your opinion of gun-free zones? Please explain.
The collective humor, right? I've got a lot of time invested in gun-free zones. So as we ran House Bill 125 this last year, the concept behind it is this: 96%, and it varies. You can find all sorts of different numbers out there, but roughly 96% of mass shootings, not gun violence, and I'll explain that, mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. Why is that? Well, because if you know there's not a gun in the place, then it's an easy place to hit. It's a soft target for criminals. It's really interesting. If gun-free zones worked, then we could apply that to everything. Like, no one would ever speed. And no shoplifting means no one would ever shoplift. And I mean, like, this logic doesn't work. So if I see a gun-free zone sign and I'm a bad person, I know that your kids aren't protected. I know that, you know what, we got our sheriff in the house. You know what, his job, hey, you got to protect this campus and the middle school campus and the elementary school campus, and you got to try to get resource officers, and it's an impossibility. We just don't have it in our budget. We don't have it in our capability, and all of a sudden, guess who's left in a very vulnerable place? Our children. Or what about my daughter who's going to go to the University of Wyoming potentially, and she walks from dorm to class, and she can't defend herself? You know, we have to start asking those questions. So let's take it a step further. Gun violence, gang gun violence is the highest gun violence, but that's completely different. That's in the streets and stuff. But mass shootings, it's in that position. We must address this. We got it through both House and Senate with a majority. We were sitting at a place where all it needed was a signature by our governor, and he chose not to sign that.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. Mr. Thomas, over to you.
Gun-free zones were the dumbest thing ever put forth. I know that they thought it was going to work, but in common sense, you know that it won't. As Jeremy said, if you're out to do nefarious things, you are looking for a place that nobody's going to be able to defend. You're looking for a soft target. Gun-free zones create soft targets. Absolutely, there should be no gun-free zones, and all schools should be allowed, their administrators and their teachers should be allowed to carry if they would like after the proper training.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We'll start with you for this question. Question number 6, the recently established charter school in Chugwater gives parents a choice. Other area parents have chosen to homeschool their children. Should the money follow the child when parents participate in school choice? Please elaborate.
Our public schools are underfunded as it is, so we shouldn't be taking money away from them to give to a charter school. If the parents want to have their child in a charter school, then they should be able to pay for that. So we don't need to be taking funds away from our public schools. That's where they need to be. But on that point as well, as I said before, public schools need to go back to more of a basics. And we need to offer a trades, some kind of education like we used to have here when I went to high school here. We had Peak Processing, which was a trade school. A lot of us went on to careers for 40 years in meat cutting, and that has been gone by the wayside. So that is something that we should have back in public schools, and we can't do that if we keep taking money away to give them to charter schools.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Haroldson, over to you.
So the charter school bill that came before the legislature a number of years ago, the conversation was, what about our small communities? What about places where traditional educational facilities are not scratching the itch or meeting the need? And so we kind of did a pilot program where we said, we want to do a small number of charter schools and give an opportunity. We had the opportunity to see one of those charter schools come to Chugwater. There was a lot of footwork that needed to take place, a lot of beating the bushes, so to speak, to make that reality. But as we saw that take place, we went from a school that was barely able to justify through its per student income, keeping the doors open to a place where we actually are now seeing 80 some odd students enrolled this year. That's exciting, that's awesome. At the end of the day, the children are not there for the schools are there for the children. Our children, that's the end of the day. And so education savings accounts have proven time and time again that they don't defund or eliminate public education. In fact, we all know in free markets, we get better education, we get better business. And so it raises the water for all boats at that point. You have to understand, a homeschooled child, none of that funding goes to the public school. It doesn't. And so in the ESA platform and model, there's definitely conversations of partial funding going to the school and partial funding going to the parent. There's a lot of options out there, and ESAs, we have to do those. That's something we have to look into.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. Okay, for question number 7, we're going to start with Mr. Thomas again. Should Wyoming work toward getting more federal dollars to our state? Please explain your answer.
In a short answer, yes, we should be trying to get more federal dollars without the stipulations that go along with it. We need to keep Wyoming first. Everything we do, every fund we get, we should look at it through the glasses of what's good for Wyoming, what's good for our citizens, and Wyoming first.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Haroldson, go ahead.
So a week and a half ago, my family and I just got back from Alaska, and we had the awesome opportunity of going on the Russian River and catching sockeye salmon, my son and I. And the interesting part is this: you got a 25-pound salmon swimming in the water, and you drag a lure across its face, and it bites, and then I reel it in. That's federal funds. There's always a hook. So the reality is this: do we want more federal money? No, we don't want more federal money, because federal money only takes away our freedoms. We have the best opportunity for the most robust economy in the United States. We could be a beacon on a hill of economics in this country, and we understand that there's a 70%, we just heard the number, 70% increase right now in electrical need in Texas. They don't know how they're going to produce this power. They have no clue. We've got 100 years worth of power for this country in coal sitting up in that basin. And for some reason, federal dollars and federal idiocracy has told us we can't take that out of the ground, burn it in our power plants, send it down the line, and take care of our country. We should be the largest exporter of electricity in the United States, and they should be looking to us to make sure we stay a first world country with economic strength. Federal dollars will forever take away our ability to truly be a free state. So if you ask federal dollars and me, I've got a lot of stories if you want to hear them, and I can tell you about all the hooks they stick in them.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. This last question will start with you. Question number 8. It has been proven that electronic voting machines can be hacked. Mail-in ballots and drop boxes make it easier to commit voter fraud. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is election security? What common sense measure would you support to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat?
So I think that every one of us probably went to bed 4 years ago going, you know what, this is sewed up and in the bag. And then we all woke up to something completely different. I'm talking about our presidential election. And it didn't take a rocket scientist to look at it and go, something's just off here. At that point in time, I had a 9-year-old son who woke up and said, Dad, I think they cheated. I mean, we didn't have the conversation. That was just his, he saw the numbers, he's like, this just doesn't make sense. we have seen that our election system is flawed. So this is what I will say right out of the gate. Our local election officers, our local election authorities have done a phenomenal job in Platte County. But the problem that we're up against is the fact that we have state statutes that kind of put them in a tough spot, number one. And number two, we've got equipment that I don't frankly trust. And so what is an option that we can do? This is what I like. Anyone in this room, all of our Senate 6 guys in here and gals, you want to know if you won that night or lost. And tabulators give us that ability. So I think this is what we need. We need a paper ballot that we can run through a tabulator that the next day we take out and hand count. We can do both. We can have the freedom of that technology, and on the flip side, we can have a hand-counted audit. Let's check each other. I mean, this is checks and balances, isn't it? That's a beautiful thing. Right now, currently, that is not something we can do with Wyoming statute. So I have a bill in the process right now to fix that, so that we can have that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Haroldson. Mr. Thomas, over to you.
Election integrity is 10. I mean, it's obviously our last election was not completely above board. I think we can all agree to that. We're a small enough county that I think we can do hand counts and paper ballots. And there should be proof of your, just as much as you have to prove to get your driver's license, you should have to prove to be able to vote legally in this county. So I agree with that we should have paper ballots and hand count them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Roy, you want to close us up?
Please, another round of applause for our House candidates. And that concludes our basting of the candidates. If they'd step out here in the Commons and you can ask them a couple of quick questions, go for it. Thank you.
This will be live streamed on YouTube whenever Richard gets it up soon, hopefully.
It's live now.
And it's Wyoming GOP, is that correct, Richard?
It's, hold on one moment. So YouTube, it's at Platte County GOP. And
Say that again, please.
It's on YouTube at Platte County GOP, and the video is called Platte County Candidate Forum.
Okay, it's YouTube at Platte County GOP, and it should be up tomorrow at the latest, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, it's actually live right now.
Pardon?